Hey everyone, welcome. Good evening. So before we get started, I want to make sure everybody can hear and see me. So if you can, there's a chat on the right side of your screen. So say hello. I see people saying hi. I would also like to know if this is your first book bash or if you've joined us before, and if so, how many have you been to? I would also love to know if you are enjoying any snacks or drinks and what are they. Please share in the chat. Um, I see a bunch of hellos. I see highs. Second book bash. This is my first. This is my third. Very great. First. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. This is our fifth book bash. So we've done an in-person one. We've done four virtual. This is our fourth. So excited to have you all here tonight. So welcome to Omaha Public Library's virtual book bash. I'm Erin Dewar. I'm the Readers and Writers Librarian for OPL. I'm going to be your host for the evening. You might take a minute to get familiar with your screen. This is a new version of Crowdcast, so if you have joined us before, it might be slightly different. So on the right, hopefully you found that chat. You will also see a Q&A box over there. So if you have any general OPL or library questions, you can drop them there and we will answer them before the end of the night. So throughout the evening, you will see comments in the chat from Amy Mather, who is OPL's Adult Services Manager. She's going to be managing the chat. She's there to answer questions you have. She's going to send you helpful links and information throughout the night, including a link to our prize drawing and a link to our full book list for this evening. One thing you should definitely pay attention to is a link that she will drop that is for our prize giveaway. So watch out for a bit.ly link with that. She will probably drop it here very shortly. So we are giving away 10 prizes this evening. We have four $25 gift cards to local bookstores. Those include The Bookworm, Dundee Book Company, The Next Chapter, and The Book Nook. We also have 6 copies of this year's Omaha Reads title, The Perfume Thief by Timothy Schaffert. If you're not familiar with Omaha Reads, it is our yearly community book club that will be hosting some amazing programs and in-person author event as well in September and October this year. So please fill out that survey when you see that link. It is just a couple of feedback questions and then info for us if you are a prize winner so we can contact you and get you your prize. You do not have to be present at the end of the show to get your prizes, but you do have to fill out that form. So, tonight during our program, you're going to hear about several different services and programs that we have. The first is probably the OPL Reading Challenge. This is a group of 12 challenges designed to help you broaden your reading horizons. Book talkers might recommend titles for specific challenges. Also, a reminder that if you finish all 12 of those challenges, to stop into your branch and get your finisher pin. It's a very cute little enamel pin that looks kind of like this. You're also going to hear about OPL's book club bag collection. So this is a collection of titles that we have specifically curated for book clubs. It is a physical bag that has 10 to 12 copies of a specific title along with a discussion guide, and they're meant for you to check out like normal items and then use with your own book club. And the last service you might hear is about OPL's podcast, The Book Drop. This is a weekly podcast hosted by OPL staff members. So if you're not familiar, The Book Drop is a weekly podcast where we talk about new genres or topics from the book world, and then we share our love of reading. So you can look for The Book Drop on your favorite podcast app. Book talkers might mention it as reading a book that was mentioned on the podcast as one of this year's reading challenge categories. So you will find information about all of those programs and services on omahalibrary.org. Okay, so that is about it for me. We are going to hear from 7 OPL staff members tonight. I'm going to call them book talkers. You'll hear from the first 3, then we'll take a 5 to 10 minute intermission, and then we will come back with our 4 final book talkers. We hope to be done by 8:30, but if not, we hope you will stick around to hang out with us and get us finished up. So don't forget, let us know in the chat what you're excited about that you're hearing, and give me one moment, and I'm going to bring up Anna, our first book talker. Go for it, Anna.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna, as Erin said. I'm so excited to talk to you today about these few books that I have on tap. The first one is America is Not the Heart by Elaine Castillo. This came out in 2018. And this is a character driven family saga that really dives into the hearts and minds of immigrants with complicated pasts. And the hero in this story is conveniently named Hero. She is formerly a doctor for a revolutionary army in the Philippines, and now she's in her 30s, just moved to California to join family that she barely knows. And she's trying to adjust from this life she had in the field and in prison camps to babysitting an 8-year-old and working a restaurant register. She's trying to live a normal life after experiencing a lot of trauma and displacement. This book really honors a diversity within the immigrant community. We have characters that are, some are poor or uneducated, some are accustomed to wealth and status, and they're all balancing between, American and Filipino culture, but in their own unique ways. That was the thing that I really loved about this book. It really challenges the idea that immigrants from the same country are, a monolith. And you'll learn a lot about the Philippines in this one, or at least I did. Their indigenous cultures, dominant cultures, food, slang, customs. I really loved that part of the book. And I also really loved just the exuberant, complex, and authentic characters that were developed. I wanted to hang out with them like they were real people. And this book also has a really lovely LGBTQ storyline that progresses in a really lovely way throughout the book. The title is an homage to a work of classic Filipino literature. It's called America is in the Heart. That came out in 1943, written by Carlos Bolason. And it's like often thought of as like a Filipino immigrant's version of The Grapes of Wrath. And this book is kind of a response to that, but updated for our contemporary times. This is a book that's great for fans of found families, epic intergenerational stories, and lovable yet flawed characters. If you're doing the reading challenge, this would work for the read a book by an American or an Asian American or Pacific Islander author. And it's also been mentioned on the podcast by me. I've talked it up because I liked it so much. We have this in print, ebook, and large print formats. My next rec is a book called Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. This came out in 2019. And this is a really meditative, lyrical story about a family of four that's on a road trip to the Southwest. It's meant to be like a working vacation that hopefully will also rekindle some relationships between the parents. They've been together for a long time. Each brought a child from a different relationship into their relationship, but the family's blended well. And for years, things have been good, but not so much recently. So the first half of the story is narrated to us by the wife slash mother. She's an archivist who is pondering the complexities of perspective and parenthood. And her goal on this trip is to document the journey of immigrant children that are traveling to the US from Mexico. Her husband's purpose for the trip is to capture sound in the land where the Apaches last surrendered. And throughout the book, he shares stories about Native American history with his family. So the second half of the book, we get a really massive plot twist and a new narrator, the precocious young son in the family. The pace picks up here. The plot becomes more like external than internal. The family's research subjects begin to enter their lives in really tangible ways, not just philosophically. And readers will start to wonder if the family will remain intact by the end of the book. So we get lots of themes of family, marriage, memory, immigration, and displacement that resonate throughout this story. And it has just a really quietly magnetic power. This would work for the reading challenge about travel. And we have this in print, ebook, downloadable audiobook, and book club bag formats. Next up is Calling for a Blanket Dance by Oscar Hokia. This came out in 2022, actually just like last month, I think. So it's a fresh book in the world. It's a deep dive into the life of one Native American man named Ever. And it's a coming of age story that follows him from birth to adulthood. And it uses multiple narrators to communicate the complexities and developments of not just like his singular life, but really of the bigger Native American experience in contemporary America. So his childhood isn't easy, but he doesn't give up. And he's complicated too. Like at times you think he's a terrible person, and at other times you're really going to be rooting for him. I really liked how this book explores relationships between a lot of different groups. We have characters that are Mexican, Cherokee, Kiowa, and it all helps break down those ideas of Native American identity as a singular thing. This range of perspectives really adds a lot of richness to the story, and it almost feels like a mystery you're unraveling as you get more and more perspectives from different characters throughout the book. It's a really compelling and effective story of the contemporary Native American experience. This would work for the reading challenge for the decade you were born in, if you were born anytime from the 70s to today. And we have this in print and ebook format. I will next recommend When We Were Birds by Ayana Lloyd Bonwo. This came out in 2020 as well. And this is an atmospheric love story that's like wrapped up in a ghost story. It's lush magical realism. It's set in Trinidad. And it's the story of two people that are meeting amidst their own kind of personal upheavals and then trying to fall in love with each other on top of figuring out who they are in these really transitional periods in their lives right now. So we have Yejide and Darwin, and Yejide's mother has just died, and this has meant that she now inherited the family curse of guiding lost souls to the afterlife. So she's figuring out what that means for her now. And Darwin has just been forced to take a job at a cemetery, which goes completely against his Rastafarian beliefs, and it also severely damages his relationship with his mother. So they're both a little lost and they're both trying to lean into these new versions of themselves. But this book makes you wonder, what's the cost of that? And can two people that are kind of broken learn how to become whole together? So we have lots of themes of like death and trauma, but I promise it's not a depressing book. Death is discussed in a way that really affirms life. And it's just got really richly detailed writing that makes you feel like you're in Trinidad. It's a really lovely love story ultimately. We have this in print and downloadable audiobook formats. Next up is The Seven Good Years by Edgar Carrot. This came out in 2015. And if you're a person that's kind of wondering how you get through a period of war, death, and uncertainty while keeping your humanity intact, this book might give you some tips on how to navigate that kind of environment. So Edgar Carrot's answer to that question is just to lean into humor and just the absurdity of it all. He's an Israeli writer, and the 7 good years he's talking about in the title of this book are the years between the birth of his first son and the death of his father. And bombs are dropping in Israel throughout this whole time. So this is the author's first work of nonfiction, and the charm in these essays really made me eager to read more of his work. They're autobiographical essays that are candid, reflective, and just darkly funny. Readers will hear about the struggles of everyday life and raising a child during wartime, having parents that are Holocaust survivors, and siblings that take very different approaches to religion from you. Some of the most effective and memorable passages in this book are the ones about his son Lev. The games they devise to find shelter during an air raid, his insistence that he's a cat, whether or not he's going to join the military at age 3. So many topics that are raised are maybe not so sunny, but I still finished the book feeling a lot better about the world and my ability to navigate difficulty. It's a really authentic acknowledgement of both the troubles of our time and the power, just the power of humanity. This would be great for fans of Kurt Vonnegut or Jewish humor in general, or just anyone kind of looking for like a new perspective on tough situations, which we can probably all relate to a little bit these days. So if you're in the reading challenge, this would work for a collection of short stories slash essays, and we have this in print and downloadable audiobook formats. My last recommendation is Recitative by Toni Morrison. And this was actually first published in 1983. It's the only short story that Toni Morrison ever wrote. And just recently it was published as like a standalone, beautiful little book. So you can just get that story by itself in a little neat package. So the title is a musical term that refers to a type of singing that is often used like in interludes or dialogue. And this story is very much like a series of interludes. It's broken into 5 primary events, and then the readers are left to kind of fill in the gaps in between themselves. So we follow 2 women, Twyla and Roberta, from their time as childhood friends to mostly unplanned encounters as adults. And Morrison wrote this as, quote, an experiment in the removal of all racial codes from a narrative about 2 characters of different races for whom racial identity is crucial. So you're the experiment or the subject of the experiment in this writing exercise from Toni Morrison as the reader. One of these characters is Black, one is white, and Morrison never reveals which is which or who. Like it's you don't know. So it's really interesting. It's an interesting opportunity and experience to have as a reader because we don't I feel like have a lot of reading experiences like that. Lots of things are laid out to us. And yeah, so we see like the contrast in their experiences and perspectives, their families, jobs, how they see themselves in relation to each other. And it's just a really thought provoking, character driven book that will give you a lot to think about. Not just like what happens to the characters in the story, but also, your own interpretation and biases and like what you assume to be um, throughout the book. So if you're doing the reading challenge, this would work for a Midwestern author, as Toni Morrison was born in Ohio. And it's also set, begins in the 60s and it ends in the 80s. So it'd work for the Decades Challenge too, if you were born in any of those decades. And we have this in print, ebook, and large print format. Thank you guys.
Hello, my name is David Dick. I am a specialist for Omaha Public Library. You might know me from such branches as Abrahams and Benson, or you might know me from such OPL podcasts as The Book Drop. First, I'm going to talk about Sellout, the major label feeding frenzy that swept punk, emo, and hardcore 1994 to 2007 by Dan Ozzie. This is a great book for people like me who still buy CDs and have fond memories of listening to alternative rock radio and a rusted out Chevy Celebrity with a dent in the bumper. This book looks at the era in which major labels were willing to throw lots of money at punk bands in their quest to find the next Nirvana. It starts with Green Day's 1994 Dookie album and concludes with Against Me's 2007 New Wave. It is also interesting to see the attitude among punks shift in regards to bands signing to majors. You can use it for the reading challenge for a microhistory, a book mentioned on the book drop, or if you were born in the 90s and the aughts because you're really young, a book set in the decade in which you were born. We have it in OPL in print, and this is Sellout by Dan Ozzie because I am not reading the full title again. Next up, I am going to talk about My Heart is a Chainsaw. Anyone who knows me and has been to the book bash would know that there's going to be at least one horror book in here. So this is it. This is My Heart is a Chainsaw. It's by Stephen Graham Jones. It is a complex and smart ode to classic 80s slashers. So this is a good book for you if you are a big fan of the movies of John Carpenter or Wes Craven. The protagonist is Jade Daniels, and she is a poor indigenous horror fan living in a gentrifying town. The book does a fantastic job at capturing her voice, making you really get to know her as a character. When the killings start, she recognizes a resemblance to the films that she loves. A gruesome and insightful look at trauma and abuse, and you can use it for the reading challenge for a book about water, a book about travel, or a book mentioned on the book drop. We have it in OPL as in print, an ebook, as an audiobook, or as a downloadable audiobook. And this is My Heart is a Chainsaw by the excellent Stephen Graham Jones. Next up, I am going to talk about Pickard County Atlas by Chris Harding Thornton. It is a bleak and lyrical Midwestern Gothic, and it follows a broken family and the cop that antagonizes them as they confront past tragedies. It starts with a slow atmospheric build and then picks up pace as things fall apart for the characters. It leads to an explosive climax. It can be used for the reading challenge for a book by a Midwestern author, a book mentioned on the book drop, or if you were born in the 70s, so we're going old this time, a book set in the decade you were born, well, older than the 90s. We have it in OPL in print, as an ebook, as a downloadable audiobook, or as a book club bag, and this is Pickard County Atlas by Chris Harding Thornton. I'm going to tell you about Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer. Weird fiction can be a difficult genre to define, but Vandermeer is the master of it, and the first name people say when talking about it. It is a surreal, apocalyptic conspiracy thriller with the author's common themes of environmentalism and decaying personal relationships mirroring the ecological collapse. The paranoia combined with the psychedelia reminds me a lot of one of my favorite authors, Philip K. Dick, and the sense of inevitability and dread and seems very familiar over the course of the last couple of years for some reason. Who knows about that? Yeah. But it can be used for the reading challenge as a OPL top shelf book or a book about travel. And we have it in print, an ebook, or as a downloadable audiobook if you want to hear it read out loud. And this is Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer. Now I am going to tell you about a classic of the sword and sorcery genre. This is Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock. This is the first in a series of omnibuy, so I'm sneaking in a second book talk in here a little bit with Stormbringer, which is the second volume, which is also out. And this collects 2 novels and 2 short story collections of Moorcock's iconic anti-hero Elric. Elric is the sorcerer emperor of a decaying island nation who sustains his own life with a cursed sword that drinks the souls of his enemies. He is also the world's embodiment of the eternal champion who exists within the multiverse to balance the forces of order and chaos. This is both a philosophical and subversive series, but it's also one that can inspire some really awesome paintings on the side of a van. It can be used for the reading challenge for a book about travel, a book about water, a collection of short stories, a book mentioned on the book drop, or if you were born in the 70s or 80s, a book published in the decade in which you were born. Since it's an omnibus, you can count it 4 times for 4 different books and use a different reading challenge each time. So if you want to knock out a good chunk of the reading challenge with just one book, might I suggest Elric? And yeah, we have it in OPL in print. Elric of Melnibone. Next up, I am going to talk to you about a graphic novel for a change of pace. This is Red Rosa, a graphic biography of Rosa Luxemburg by Kate Evans. It tells the story of the brilliant Jewish Polish revolutionary socialist who was murdered in Weimar, Germany between the world wars. The book does a fantastic job at balancing her work as a philosopher and her personal life. For example, I have some pages I want to show you because it's a graphic novel. A couple pages is she was in prison for speaking out against World War II, or World War I, which was considered treason. And you can see her, like her own words are in italic, and you can see her like metaphorically flying above the walls. But then turn a page, snap back to reality, and you can see World War I playing out with camera film showing the history that was happening outside of jail. Another area, just to get into more of her philosophical work. It's a great sequence right here where she's explaining Das Kapital to her family at the dinner table and using the salt and pepper shaker and the gravy boat just to go through all the nuances. It's also great if you want to understand that particular book, which is very long and in 3 volumes. But afterwards, shortly after that, you see her getting off the train into college. So beautiful art there, and it really balances both her as a historical figure and just as a person. It's just a great book for looking at the humanity of the people who have done a lot to influence history and puts their ideas in context. You can use it for the reading challenge for a book about travel or a graphic novel written and illustrated by a woman. We have it in OPL in print, and this is Red Rosa by Kate Evans. Gonna wrap up with a brand new book that I barely got my hands on in time for this. This is Drunk on All Your Strange New Words by Eddie Robson. I have been a huge fan of science fiction for a long time, especially science fiction that's about how language can fundamentally change people, like Ted Chiang's Story of Your Life or China Miéville's Embassy Town. This book puts a different spin on that whole idea by making it funny. Lydia is a translator for Fritz, an alien cultural attaché. The act of translating Fritz's telepathic language puts human in a mental state resembling being drunk. A murder occurs, and Lydia must clear her name and nab the real killer. She is a very relatable protagonist, and the book does a good job at putting us in her psychological state, even when she's drunk. And it has a lot of great balance of humor and heart for a high concept book about language. You can use it for the reading challenge for a book about travel, because all books are about travel, or a book mentioned on the book drop. We have it in OPL in print or as a downloadable audiobook, and I haven't listened to the audiobook, but I've heard great things about it, so you can always check it out with that. This is Drunk on All Your Strange New Words by Eddie Robson. Thank you.
Hello, friends. My name is Jay. I'm a Youth and Family Services Specialist at the Milton R. Abrahams branch. I'm going to give a clap for David. You can tell I do story time by the way I clap. Anyway, I have a question for all of you. Do you believe in love in the age of reality television? You answered no. This is the perfect book for you. It's right over here. Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen is the story of 4 girls traveling to the Pacific Northwest to vie for the heart of the catch. We have Christian influencer Lila May, car model and seasoned villain Vanessa, the old one and the black one Renee, and fashion blogger Amanda attempting to capture the heart of Glamstipic's founder Jeremy Blackstone. This book is great if you love reality television. If you love serialized dating, it has production riggery. The girls are fighting. They are fighting. They are being forced to fight. And also, they're fighting for their lives. Yeah, this is actually not just a book about reality television, but a horror book that features a lesbian Sasquatch. If that intrigues you, if that brings your interest, this is the perfect book for you. It's scary, it's zany, it's really weird, and it's a quick read. We have it in a print book and ebook formats, and it also will fulfill your reading challenge for a book about travel or a book about or featuring water. My next book is The Latecomer by Jean Hanff Corlitz. I'm going to lead you through the story of the wealthy Oppenheimer family. We have a mother and a father. The mother desperately wants to have children, and the father could not care less, but is rich. And so the mother goes through all of the best fertilization specialists in New York City until she finally is faced with her last chance. We have 4 eggs united with sperm waiting in a freezer for her. They're going to implant 3. And when that fails, because of course it's going to, they're going to use that last one to impregnate a surrogate so that she can finally have her kid. But of course, a miracle happens, and that's not how it quite goes. We have triplets born. The family is united, except the triplets hate each other, and they also hate their mom, and they also hate their dad. So this book is giving you family drama. It's giving you just a lot of messy, very, very deeply written characters. This is a character-driven plot. If you're familiar with Jean Hanff Corlitz, she loves to write a book that takes a while to get together and then explodes. So for the majority of these books, we have 3 siblings fighting, and then there is the titular latecomer, that 4th egg that spent 17 years in the freezer waiting to be born and slouches towards Brooklyn to finally have their shot, to find a family in disarray. So this book has already been optioned for a TV series. It is get into it now so you can tell your friends, oh, I read that book months ago. I was told to read that book by an Omaha Public Library employee. And it's perfect for you. It's perfect for everyone. My next book is a challenge. It is Levana by literary darling Otessa Moshfegh. You might remember her from such books as Eileen or My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This is a book about a village boy who maybe commits murder, but it's accidental, surely, and is adopted by the lord of a township. Basically, with this novel, you're rooting for someone, you're rooting for a villager that has had something terrible to happen to them, from famine, drought, general incompetence, and then they do something terrible to someone else. You are getting a bunch of interlapping narratives, interlapping perspectives, and they are all uniquely terrible and horrifying and disgusting in their own way. Otessa Moshfegh is daring you to read this book, to continue to read this book, so you get all that literary that you're craving, even as the characters do disgusting things. So this is in print book. We also have the audiobook, so you can listen to Otessa Moshfegh narrate this herself, and you can wonder why. Why did she do this? This is also great for your reading challenge for a book about or featuring water and the lack thereof. It's also great for reading a book mentioned on the book drop. My next book is by MacArthur Fellow Colson Whitehead. He's reliable. He wrote The Underground Railroad. He wrote the Nickel Boys, excuse me. And his latest title, Harlem Shuffle, is about Ray Carney, a furniture salesman who has a pregnant wife and a young child at home. And he is just slightly bent. He's mostly on the up and up, but every so often, a stolen item might come his way, and he might resell it. He might fence it. But his cousin Freddie just happened upon the biggest score of all time, working with very, very shady and dangerous people. So Ray Carney is fighting his legacy, his familial legacy of crime, as he's slowly drawn into the underworld of 1960s Harlem. This is a great historical fiction novel. It's also a heist. It's riveting, it's literary, and it's perfect for your next book club. So we have it in a book club bag kit. We also have it in book, ebook, downloadable audiobook, playaway, ebook. Yeah, I think that's all of it. There's no excuse. We have it in everything. So get into it. Wonderful. My next book is a little controversial. If you're wearing pearls, you might get ready to clutch them because I'm about to talk about I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. If you do not know, Jeanette McCurdy was one of the stars of the Nickelodeon show iCarly. She is talking in this memoir about her very, very complicated relationship with her mom. Her mom was a breast cancer survivor. She was a hoarder. She was a Mormon, and she may have had OCD, a couple of eating disorders that she passed on to Jeanette. So this is a compelling story about Jeanette becoming a rising child star, forced by her mom's expectation to continue acting, even though she hates it. This book is amazing. It's very shocking. It's very heartfelt and surprisingly very funny. Jeanette McCurdy tells horrible things that have happened to her with a bleakness and a humor that really just it's shocking, but it's fantastic. This book is sold out everywhere, so your best chance of reading it is either to buy the ebook, but why would you do that when you can rent the ebook from us? You can also get the print book from us. It's perfect for reading a book about neurodiversity or a book set in the decade you were born, if you were born in the 90s like I was. Yeah, I would recommend this book 10,000 times over. It's definitely the book of the year. But it is not my last book. My last book is Disorientation by Elaine Shea Chow, and it's my personal favorite. Basically, in this book, we follow Ingrid, who is an 8th year PhD student struggling to write her dissertation. This is her last year of being fully funded, so it's either write it now or go home after 8 years without a PhD, or struggle on student loans. So there's a little bit of motivation there. So Ingrid is writing about the Chinese American poet Xiao Wenchao, who writes terrible poems, and Ingrid might or might not have been forced into researching Xiao Wenchao as a Taiwanese American scholar, but by God, she's going to finish this dissertation. She's studying her hardest, and that's how she comes to find out that Xiao Wenchao was not a Chinese American man at all, but is actually a white man doing yellowface. This novel is all about Ingrid's struggle to contain this information, to try to save the 8 years of work she spent studying this man. What I love about this novel is it explores themes of race. It explores how higher academia is predatory to PhD students, predatory to students of color, but also it kind of skewers everyone that you would find on a college campus. No one is safe. Anyone that you might find on a college campus has their wig ripped off by this novel. Elaine Shea Chow absolutely has a reader for life in me. I would tell you to go read this book immediately if you have not read a book by an Asian American or Pacific Islander author yet for your reading challenge. Here at the library, we have it in print book and downloadable audiobook. Thank you for riding out there with me. We are done. That's the end of my book bash, and I believe we're heading into the break.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Anna, David, Jay. So entertaining. David, thank you for the physical comedy. It's always great. So we are going to take let's say 8-minute break. So we'll come back by our time at 7:42, roughly. So we're going to get set up with our next set of book bashers. This is a great time to fill out that prize survey. I'm going to pull those prizes shortly after this intermission. If you need to get another drink or refill your snacks, this is a great time to do that. One thing I meant to say at the top was that if you have one of our book bash booklets, you will notice one of our book bashers. You won't see them tonight. Angela is not, she's out sick with us. So please, she has some really great picks in there. So check out that list and check them out in the catalog and take a look at those. So we will be back in just a few minutes. with our second half. Hi, everybody, we are back. That goes so fast. We have 4 more book talkers for you. Make sure to fill out that prize survey. I just linked it again under Omaha Public Libraries in the chat. I will be pulling those very shortly. So I'm going to bring up Nicole, our next book talker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole. I work at the Florence branch. I'm going to start things off with a book from my favorite genre, romance, of course. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey is the first book in a Schitt's Creek-inspired rom-com duology about Piper and Hannah Bellinger. Our story starts with Piper, an LA socialite who's arrested for throwing a party that goes way out of hand. As punishment, her stepfather ships her off to Westport, a small fishing town in the Pacific Northwest. Ew. Hannah insists on going too to support her sister. As you can imagine, Piper and Hannah are complete outsiders and stick out like sore thumbs. The judgy looks from everyone in town, the lack of confidence from Brendan, the stoic, moody, brooding fishing captain, pushes Piper to prove everyone wrong, especially Brendan. Tessa Bailey does an incredible job transporting you to Westport or Schitt's Creek if you've seen the show. I kept expecting Stevie to show up, not gonna lie. It Happened One Summer is steamy, filled with banter, handsome, self-aware men, and strong, independent women. Like an onion, it has layers. Along with love stories, it covers heavier themes like grief, losing loved ones, family dynamics, identity, and home. The personal growth as individuals and strong sense of place sets this book apart from other contemporary romances. Next up, we have Dancing at the Pity Party, a Dead Mom graphic memoir by Tyler Fetter. As someone who lost a parent at a young age, Dancing at the Pity Party makes me feel so seen. My and Tyler's experiences are drastically different, but I still felt so connected to her and this book. Guilt is a huge part of losing a parent, at least for me. So is anger and apathy. There's always a veil of sadness during any big event because there's a glaring, gaping hole where someone should be. And even on normal days, when there's a moment you forget they're gone and you want so badly to tell them something, then you're quickly reminded you can't. Tyler describes this feeling perfectly. Quote, "As the years continue to pass, I worry that I'm forgetting her. I feel like I'm on one of those moving walkways at the airport, and I can see her getting smaller and smaller as I travel slowly into the future without her. I already don't remember the sound of her voice." End quote. Tyler writes about death and grief beautifully and with a sense of humor as well. The art is absolutely gorgeous. Dancing at the Pity Party will have you laughing on one page and crying on the next. Next up is Witches, The Transformative Power of Women Working Together by Sam George Allen. The best way to describe Witches is a celebration of women and an investigative memoir about what it means to be and identify as a woman and just how powerful we are when we work together. Sam George Allen covers all kinds of topics, from the massive influence teen girls have on pop culture to makeup being used as self-expression and not trying to make ourselves more attractive for society, to women making moves in male-dominated industries. The main theme throughout the book isn't witchy as the title suggests, which I was kind of bummed about. But really, it's about non-sexual intimacy, the special bond women share with each other based on shared experiences, and how we are able to connect with one another so quickly because we feel safe with one another. Next up, we have Letter to a Stranger, Essays to the Ones Who Haunt Us, edited by Colleen Kinder. It's a collection of letters written to strangers. In Leslie Jamison's foreword, she sums up what this book is about much, much better than I ever could. Quote, "We spend so much of our lives in the company of people whose names we'll never know, people we'll never meet again. How rarely we honor them, how rarely we admit to ourselves the strange, unannounced ways they can lodge inside of us." End quote. The book is broken up into different sections. symmetry, mystery, gratitude, wonder, remorse, and farewell. There are more than 60 letters in this collection, with some big names you might recognize, like Lauren Groff, who wrote Matrix, Maggie Shipstead, who wrote Great Circle, and Rachel Yoder, who wrote Night Bitch. It's easy to put this book down and come back to it later, so if you're short on time and still want to read something, this is for you. Just like any collection of essays or stories, you're not going to resonate with every single one. I really connected with Peter Turchi's letter to the grandfather I hardly knew. Some might be really powerful to you, others might be a bit meh. That's the beauty of it, though. There is a letter in here for everyone, and who knows, maybe you'll feel inspired to write your own letter to a stranger. Another romance for you. I can't just stick with one, I have to do more than that. This is from the queen who gave us The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That hold list is miles long, so get on that hold list if you haven't read it yet. But this is After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a love story about a woman finding herself after losing herself in marriage. Obviously, a major theme is marriage and relationships. I'm so sorry, I'm in a room where the lights are automatic. A huge theme is marriage and relationships and just love in general. Each woman in Lauren's family has a different opinion on love and how to approach relationships. Her grandma has a very traditional take on marriage. Lauren's mom wants a relationship only if it's fun and doesn't get too serious. Lauren's sister Rachel is perfectly content being single. She doesn't feel as if she's missing something because she isn't married, even though her entire family thinks she must be miserable since she's alone. Lauren has been married for nearly 10 years, and she's on a 1-year break with her husband Ryan to try and save what's left of it. All these women approach love differently, with varying degrees of success, proving there is not one right way to be in a relationship, if at all. Ryan and Lauren don't have much screen time together except for the very beginning and the very end. Their relationship is told in flashbacks and email drafts, so we get to see how they started and how they reached their breaking point. They both pour all the ugly, painful, necessary truths out in letters, and it's one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever read. Lauren's journey of self-discovery is a roller coaster. During the first few months, she desperately wants to contact Ryan, but she stops herself every single time. Eventually, life isn't so sad anymore. She gets back into running and spends more time with her family. Near the end of their year break, Lauren realizes she doesn't need her husband, but she wants him, and that means a million times more. Just because you can live without someone doesn't mean you want to. Taylor Jenkins Reid masterfully weaves together several elements and storylines. Every character is necessary, every conversation is necessary. The story and the characters are absolutely beautiful. I also need to highlight how gorgeous and poetic the writing is. It almost felt like prose poetry because of how much emotion Taylor Jenkins Reid brings to the page. I don't cry at books, but this one almost got me. And finally, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I had to pick at least one classic to rave about. My English major heart just can't say no to it. And it's available as a book club bag. I run a book club at Abraham's, and this is our pick for August, and I'm super excited to discuss it. Victor Frankenstein is an obsessed scientist who makes it his mission to create life itself. He sneaks around graveyards to find what he needs to build a person and shocks life into it with electricity. But the creature is not what Victor envisioned, so he outright rejects the creature and denies him any form of companionship. The result of this mistreatment is devastating. The idea for Frankenstein came from a conversation in 1816 among Lord Byron and Percy and Mary Shelley. They were on holiday in Geneva and it was miserable outside. So as writers do, to pass the time, they challenged each other to write ghost stories. The men were saying women can't write scary stories because the subject matter is too gruesome and their minds are just too delicate for that. And yet, Mary was the only one to finish writing her ghost story. Frankenstein is considered one of the first science fiction novels ever. It explores important issues such as alienation, the consequences and ethics of scientific studies, as well as the nature of creation and destruction. The creature is not what modern society makes him out to be, and after getting to know him, you'll learn how severely the harsh treatment he receives from others impacts his outlook on his life and himself. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jake, and I am an adult services librarian over at Mittlard. And my first book is Fuzz by Mary Roach. You may be familiar with her previous work, Lab Girl. And so she, this time around, is investigating what happens when nature breaks the law. Whose jurisdiction is it if a bear eats all my trash? I don't know. Well, if you read this book, you're going to know. So you should read it. It's super funny. Every chapter is kind of like a different vignette. So for me, it almost, you could almost call them microhistory. So I guess if you want to keep this on the microhistory list, you can. But I actually chose it because it is also a book club bag. So you got a nature loving or science writing book club that wants to hear about how to survive against a puma attack, then yeah, you should check out this book. It's very funny. It has a kind of a clear narrative because as each chapter ends, it leads the next one in, and that flow just feels so engaging and great. So the one thing that I think if you don't read this book, the thing you should take away from it is don't mess around with wild animals. And if they attack you, they're going to do it again. That's just, it's been proven. It's in the book. So yeah, you should read this book. It may actually save your life. It's available as a print book, audiobook on CD, an ebook on Libby, and as, of course, that book club bag. Book 2 is Buzz, The Nature and Necessity of Bees by Thor Hansen. So I chose this book because I've had a kind of a big change in my personal life in which, or at least my professional life, where I went from one subject to urban gardening. And for those of you who can see where this is leading, I'm starting to kind of get an interest in bees and apiaries and beekeeping in general. I really, really love this book only because the author, Thor, seems to handle being able to transport you into the field and having that same excitement that he has when he finds like alkaline bees, or he in a further chapter he has the man who kind of popularized the use of mason bees for fruit trees. He has him talk about mason bees. So there I am sitting in my driveway looking at a lavender plant, and what does flies in front of me but a mason bee. And the one thing you need to know about mason bees is that when they collect pollen, it collects on their tummies. And those tummies look like little yellow aprons. I'm telling you, it is the cutest thing you will ever see. I do love it. This book has helped me actually identify multiple bees in my garden. And I think I'm getting into beekeeping. So, and don't take this book as being the end all be all, but it is definitely lit a flame in me. Unfortunately, this book is only available in print. So read up, folks. Book 3 is We Are Legion, We Are Bob by Dennis E. Taylor. This came out in 2016, and that is something to keep in mind because it is this wonderful space opera that asks the question, what would life be like if I were cryogenically frozen and my mind was installed inside of a spaceship that was meant to colonize the stars? You don't need to wonder any longer. Here it is. Now, I do want to lay down a content warning on this particular book. The main character is a professed atheist. So at a number of points within the storyline, you will definitely get that sense. And for those of you who have a strong level of faith in your life, just know that he is not kind to religion. Just wanted to make sure folks knew about that. One thing that's really great is that the author weaves in a lot of 20th and 20th century pop culture references, which are always kind of fun, and kind of plays that what if concept, like, oh, Star Trek is still popular, or Star Trek is still known by humanity hundreds of years in the future. It's pretty fast paced, and it doesn't bog itself down with too many like space battles, but there are space battles because we weren't. I mean, this is America's ship is Bob, but all the other countries on Earth send other spaceships to colonize the stars. It is a race for dominance. I will tell you right now, we only have this as the print book, but maybe I need to reach out and see if we can get the audiobook because it is awesome. The guy that reads it is Ray Porter, and if you've listened to Project Hail Mary, you've heard his work. So that's We Are Legion, We Are Bob, book 1 of the Bobverse. I don't make up the names; they do. The next book is Gardens of the Moon. We're going to kind of shift from science fiction back into fantasy because you both, I mean, if you've seen me talk before, you know those are my main genres. Gardens of the Book is book 1 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So that's the name of the series. And it is this giant world building 10-volume set that it really helped to solidify a lot of the tropes that surround grimdark fantasy and military fantasies. It starts off with the rise of this new empire, and this empire then trying to go out into the countryside and I guess liberate the people. It's very well written. Actually, one of the things that has struck me chapter after chapter with this one is oftentimes the author will infer things that happen, and so it is not one of those books that, at least that I feel, that I can like easily skim. It's has a lot of dark humor in it, so if you don't mind a little bit of that, in many ways, one of the last books I talked about, The Black Tongue Thief, has a little bit of that magic in it, but this predates it by almost 2 decades. So this was written in 1999. Um, Incidentally, it is just in general just a better, more realistic look at the horrors of war through a fantasy lens. It's available as a print book and an ebook on Libby. And that kind of leads us into book 5. So that's The Bladed Faith by David Dalglish, as you can all read on the screen. But in some ways, whereas Gardens of the Moon is kind of like an entry point for grimdark, this is more like a culmination of one author's work within that genre, on top of all of the many years of tropes, just all kind of coming together. And even the author himself talks about like this. I mean, I guess you could say this about any author's work, but he really feels that this is the full culmination of the work that he's been doing. And I didn't know this before I started reading it. David Dalglish has written 29 books. Out of nowhere, this man is very prolific, at least to me. And this book in general, when I read the back of it, for those of you who enjoy the occasional video or computer game, in many ways, the world and the setting remind me a lot of Elden Ring that came out recently. So it's this melancholy, dark fantasy world, and at its heart, the story is really about a young man whose territorial home and castle are destroyed. He's the prince. He gets you know it's fantasy, so it's got all those goofy tropes. But in this, when his castle is being attacked, the island that he lives on is protected by 2 gods, and those gods are killed in the attack, and the main character is taken hostage. He is liberated, and then the story then becomes this kind of rich, dark training montagey revenge story where he is just out to wreak revenge on his enemies. So it is an excellent book for battles and action. We only have it as a print book, but that is because it just came out in April of this year. So it's The Bladed Faith by David Dalglish. And finally, thank you, we have The Dark Lord of Dirkholm. And I wanted to end with this book because, one, Diana Wynne Jones, if you haven't read Diana Wynne Jones, she is amazing. She wrote, as some of you might be aware, Howl's Moving Castle. But this particular book was actually more of I mean, I think it's an adult title. The library calls it an adult title. So I think it's all good. One thing that I want to mention is that a couple of this one included, I listened to as an audiobook. And again, We Are Bob, I listened to as an audiobook. The audiobook version of this one is also real good, folks. It reminds me the speaker has this just wonderful lilt to them. The different characterizaschons are really excellent. The storyline itself is a world which is taken over by Joe Schmo from our world. So we are we are next door neighbors, and he opens a door using a demon, and that demon forces the entire fantasy realm to become what is essentially an amusement park. So the book opens up with what is like a little meeting between all the rulers of that world, saying we got to get rid of this guy. And from there, hilarity ensues. So Diane Wynne Jones has this excellent ability to create just a comedy of errors, and has these really humble characters who are so loving between them and their family and genuine. It's hard to believe that she was anything else but in real life. So that's Dark Lord of Dirkholm by Diana Wynne Jones, written in 1998. So it's a class. That's it, everybody. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rose. I work at the Willa branch, and here are 7 intriguing books that I'm sharing with you this evening. My first book is called Mort. It's by Robert Rapino. I picked this book off the shelf the first time because the cover looked like my cat Mikey, who had died, and I missed him. And that's the only reason I picked it up. I didn't think I would be interested, but I was. We begin with Sebastian, the house cat, who spends his days snoozing on the rug in the sunshine. His closest companion is the dog Sheba, who lives next door, and they form a deep, unbreakable bond. And one night, they are cruelly separated through no fault of their own, and at the same time, the whole world begins to change. All the animals that humans have dominated and exploited and used for thousands of years, suddenly, they are self-aware, they can understand human speech, their bodies change. The smaller animals, they grow to human size and they grow fingers and thumbs, and they turn on their former masters, and humans are hunted almost to extinction. Sebastian the house cat becomes Mort the warrior. His name means death, and his legend grows and he becomes famous, but the only thing that matters to him is to find Sheba. Everything in that book that happens that carries the story along is just background for him so that he can find Sheba. And I think you're going to want to find out what happens to Sebastian and if he ever finds Sheba. My next book is The Snow Goose. It's really a short novella. It's only 60 pages long. It was written by Paul Gallico in 1940. He is also the author of a book called Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which has just been brought back into print and has been made into a film. This story is about Philip. He's an artist and a naturalist with a physical deformity, which has caused him to hide himself away from the world. He lives in the Essex marshes on the southeast coast of England in an abandoned lighthouse, and he paints. He rides his boat around the marshes, and he runs a bird sanctuary, and he keeps to himself. And the local people pretty much leave him alone. But one day, a little girl shows up, and in her arms, she's holding a wounded snow goose. It's been brought down by a hunter. Why the snow goose is in England, they're Canadian birds, but it must have been blown across the ocean by a storm. And the little girl brings the bird to Philip and says, "Can you heal this bird?" And between the two of them, over the winter, they bring this bird back to health. And in the springtime, the snow goose flies away. But in the autumn, it returns to spend the winter at Philip's bird sanctuary. And as the years go by and the girl grows to adulthood, the bird comes back every autumn and flies away every spring. And when she's a grown woman, she realizes, despite his physical deformity, the girl loves Philip, and Philip loves her as well. But nothing is said because it's the springtime, the snow goose is getting ready to fly away, but he has to take his boat across the channel to Dunkirk and rescue stranded soldiers off the beaches of Dunkirk. And she watches them go, and the bird flies along with the boat as Philip sails away from her. And only one of these souls will come back to her. And you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. It's a very moving book. It's a quick read, but it's not a piece of fluff. It's very charming. My third book is called Joan is Okay. It's by a Chinese American author named Wei Wang. This is her first novel, and it will satisfy your reading challenge requirement for an Asian American or Pacific Islander author. The author is our heroine Joan is a critical care doctor, highly trained physician in a very high energy critical care unit, and she's at the top of her profession. And she grew up here in America, but once she and her brother were settled into their adult careers, her parents had moved back to China. Her father dies near the beginning of the book, and her mother comes back to America to live with her hugely wealthy and successful brother. And Joan moves through the world and she questions the expectations that are placed on her as a daughter, as a doctor, as a wife, not as a wife, as a neighbor, as a lover, as a sister, and ponders her role as a Chinese American and what it means to be an American. I think you'll be interested in the discoveries that she makes about all these different roles and about her own life. The next book that I have is called The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. It was published in 2018. Jake is a lonely 12-year-old. He lives in Niagara Falls in Ontario, just across Niagara Falls from us. He makes friends with Dove and Billy Yellowbird, two children who have only recently arrived in the town, and they are mourning the loss of their grandmother and being taken away from the lands that they have lived in all their life. They're lonely for the only place they've ever known. And together with Jake's Uncle Cal, who owns an occult bookstore, they begin to explore the locations of some of the urban legends in town. Now, there are strange goings on here, and there is a mystery to follow and unravel, but this is not a horror book. It is a very moving and unusual coming of age story. I did love these children and I cared about what happened to them. And so I did have a feeling of dread as the book went on because I was afraid something bad would happen to these children. But it is a very touching, moving book, and it does have kind of a surprising ending. I highly recommend it. My next book is called The Uncommon Reader. It's by Alan Bennett. It was published in 2007, and we own this as a book club kit. My own book club just read this for August, and everybody was delighted with it. Why not? Because I recommended it. It's a short book. It's only 120 pages long, and as you can see, the Queen of England is on the cover. So here's what happens. One afternoon, she's out walking her corgis in the gardens at Buckingham Palace, and she sees the Kensington Library's bookmobile is parked in the courtyard so the staff can change their books. So just to be polite, she goes in and checks out a book, and she reads it, and she brings it back the next week, and she gets another book. And just like that, she becomes a reader. She could always read, but she was never a reader. And she is helped in her new addiction to reading by one of the kitchen staff, and her senior staff is very concerned about this new habit she's developed because it's starting to distract her from her official duties. As she reads all these authors that she's met and heard about, and she comes to think about her place in history in her own life and what it has meant, and it comes to a surprising but a charming and satisfying conclusion. I think it is an enjoyable little book. It's short. It can be tossed off in an evening, but it is not a piece of fluff. It's quite charming. My next book is called Ways the World Could End by Kim Hooper. It's just published. It's a brand new book. Dave and his 15-year-old daughter Cleo are trying their best to keep it together after the death of Jana, Dave's wife and Cleo's mother. Dave sees the world a little differently than most people, and now that his wife is gone, who used to help him see that world and navigate that world and relate to it, he's having a bit of a difficult time. Plus, he's like a doomsday prepper, but not like a nut job who lives in a compound, an armored compound with barbed wire around it. He is concerned that he does his best for his 15-year-old daughter, Cleo, who was also secure in her mother's love and now is navigating the world without that, and also starting a relationship with a newcomer at her school. It was each Dave and Cleo both are afraid that they will fail each other, and the direction that the book took and its ending might be a surprise to you. My last book is called, it's a nonfiction book. It was published 2 years ago, and it's called The Cold Vanish: Seeking the Missing in North America's Wildlands. Do you have any idea how many people go missing in national parks every year? The National Park Service doesn't keep statistics on that. And it's an embarrassment to the Park Service and a frustration to law enforcement officials and search and rescue when someone does go missing and doesn't come wandering back out of the wilderness in a couple of days. There are people who vanish without a trace, and it leaves a huge hole behind in their families' lives, and their loved ones will search for them for years and years and years. There are search and rescue experts who who have made careers out of trying to help find these families find some closure. It could be something as simple as people take a few steps off of a hiking path and boom, they're gone. Or they might slip and fall into a stream, or they might take a wrong turning, or they might go out with inadequate equipment or clothing and freeze to death. They just vanish and no one knows what happens to them. And does give me pause when I think about the times that I've been in national parks and have thought, gee, I could fall down this gully and no one would ever find me and no one would ever know. It's that easy to vanish and it's that simple. It could happen to anyone who wasn't prepared in the blink of an eye. And whatever the reason they disappear, you may never look at a camping trip the same way again. That's it. Those are my books. I hope you'll pick up one or two of them and that your life will be enriched by having read them. Have a good evening.
Hello, hello. My name is Ellie Roberts, and I am the outreach specialist here at the Omaha Public Library. I am really excited to talk to you about some books. And what you need to know about me as a reader is that I love a short book. If an author can't get it done in 350 pages, it kind of loses my attention. So that's what you're going to get from me today. The first book I'm going to talk to you about is called The House of Rust by Haja Abdallah Bajaber. And this book is a print book and it came out last year. This book is a magical realist coming of age story. Kirkus Reviews calls it a novel of tradition, ritual, and mystical adventure. And what really stuck out to me is that it was the first winner of Grey Wolf Press's new African Fiction Prize. And I love Grey Wolf, so I snapped that up right away. And I think that this is a really great sign of things to come from that press because this book rules. So you follow Aisha, who is a Hadrami girl whose beloved father, a talented fisherman, goes missing. Though her grandmother is ready to begin funerary rites almost the next day, Aisha stubbornly interrogates her Mombasian community and stumbles upon Hamza, a talking cat, who helps her begin a series of eerie and death-defying quests to rescue him. So we are going on a hero's journey set on the open sea. Her victories bring her to a final battle against the exhilaratingly terrifying Baba Wa Papa, or the father of all sharks. This led me to the most intense fight scene I've read in a book, and it was so much fun. Well, this adventurous and action-packed plot could be enough on its own. Bajaber surprises readers by following Aisha after her return much longer than a typical hero's journey story would usually offer. The second half of the book is devoted to answering this question that can a girl who has found such bravery return to a respectable and simple life that will make her grandma proud? And even if she can, if it's not exactly what she wants, then should she? This book is part Odyssean, part Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, but in actuality, it's a story that's completely its own. It's for readers of Sylvia Moreno Garcia's Gods of Jade and Shadow. And what I didn't get to mention about this book that's 250 pages, but I don't think I could sum up in that many, is that Bajaber is a poet. And I just want to read a little excerpt from it because her writing is incredible and I'm not going to do it justice. This is a quote by Hamza the Talking Cat, by the way. It says, "At the end of all worlds, will you show how neat your miserly kept book of sums? Or will you have the courage and say, I did deeds good and bad. I disagreed with the world around me. I was awake and I believed and I doubted, but I was not immobilized. I was alive to the best of my abilities. I was alive. This book would count for your book about water challenge, and we have it in print format. So that is House of Rust by Haja Abdallah Bajaber. And now we're going to go to a very different place, and that place is Kansas. I'm going to tell you about a book called New to Liberty by Demisty D. Bellinger. This book came out earlier this year, and I can't believe I haven't heard about it before I picked it up a couple months ago. I'm really excited to talk about this book tonight because it is an option to complete your Read a Book by a Midwestern Author challenge, as Bellinger is from Wisconsin. This book is an expansive regional historical fiction novel, but it is for short book guys like myself. We don't get stories like that very often. It follows the longings, struggles, and bliss of three women in a rural Kansas community, seemingly frozen in time. So these stories are told in reverse chronological order. One is from 1966, one is from 1947, and one is from 1933. And if you too have a chip on your shoulder about depictions of the Midwest and how cheesy they can be sometimes, this book is absolutely for you. The setting and characters are conveyed quickly and vividly, but they're not tropes. Bellinger realizes her variously marginalized and full characters in a way that feels like it could take other authors like 200 pages, where she takes 5, which I really appreciate. And the last thing that I love about this is that in this book, the openness of the prairie isn't optimistic all the time. Sometimes those spaces are haunting. And I think that Bellinger really conveys some fear and respect for nature, which I love to read in a book about the Midwest. This has gotten comparisons to Joyce Maynard. I saw a couple comparisons to John Steinbeck's East of Eden, which is a big compliment. And, I haven't read it myself, but I'll take it for her. And people have called it an American epic in under 200 pages. So that is New to Liberty by Demisty D. Bellinger. Next, we are going to go over and talk about a very different American experience. And that American experience is the Satanic Panic. I'm going to tell you about Devil House by John Darnell. This is a book that we have in print, in e-audio, and an ebook, and it came out earlier this year. I was saying that this is my best book of the year a couple months ago, but it is duking it out with like 4 other titles right now because we are spoiled with books. Do we have any true crime readers in attendance tonight? Anybody super into true crime out there? Maybe. What about people who once were true crime readers, but then realized that all they consumed were stories about grisly murder and felt weird about it, and then had to start reading and listening to other stuff instead? This is a great book for you because I also had that experience and it really said something different to me. Devil House is gritty, suspenseful metafiction, but don't be intimidated by that. We follow the middlingly successful true crime writer Gage Chandler, who is researching a new book, and it's going fine for him. His publisher sold him the project because it involved Gage purchasing the titular Devil House, the site of a strangely underreported double murder that, in my opinion, could have fed the Satanic Panic for like at least another decade. Though he was pulled in by the promise of dead bodies atop a pyre of pornography, cryptograms in graffiti, and the specter of teenage satanic rites, Chandler's days are, in reality, full of archives, interview dead ends, and trying to find era-appropriate furniture to immerse himself in the moment of his subject's death. All of that said, Chandler is a not unlikable and interesting character who another reviewer noted seems to have taken like a quasi-Hippocratic oath, and that is to say that he aims to do no more harm than has already been done to the people who he's writing about. But what I liked about this book is that the question it's asking is if Chandler, or as Darnell seems to ask any other writer for that matter, wield the power of crime writing without indulging his audience's love of moral clarity and justice, of voyeurism, and of spectacle. This book has a slow plot, which usually is an absolute no for me, but this completely had me hooked. It's a book about books, it's a book about ethics and ego and existential conflict, and somehow it's all of those things without feeling like navel-gazing and self-indulgent. If you liked Anthony Horowitz's Magpie Murders or Ruth Ozeki's A Tale for the Time Being or any book by Percival Everett, this might be a good one for you. So that is Devil House by John Darnielle. Let's see. Let's talk about more haunted stuff. So I'm going to tell you about a book called The Stranger Diaries by Ellie Griffiths. She spells her name the correct way, which is Elly. Sorry to any IE Ellies out there. And we have this book in print format, in ebook format, audio, e-audio, and we've got it in a book club kit. And I think it will be really fun to talk about with your friends. So this book stood out to me because it gives me like strong Knives Out sensibilities, and it's kind of a British murder mystery. You've also got Gothic suspense elements. It's a small town police procedural and multiple perspectives. So if any of those things are kind of a hook for you, look out for this one. This is a bookish mystery that follows Claire Cassidy, a teacher and aspiring biographer who specializes in the work of little-known writer R.M. Holland. She has a small but fulfilling life as a single mother until a falling out with her closest friend, who soon after is found dead, with a line from one of Holland's obscure works on a sticky note beside her. Unsure who to trust with this information, and with local police getting a little too unfriendly, she turns to her beloved diary to organize her thoughts. But then, one day, the diary seems to turn to her because there's new notes in there, and they are not in her handwriting. And her new ghostwriter, of sorts, seems to know an awful lot about Ella's death. This is a book for book lovers. It's a balanced contemporary interpretation of a beloved, eerie literary style, a multiple perspective work of tense investigation and obfuscation. What's not to love? If you're a reader of Louise Penny or Faye Kellerman, if you like Kate Morton or basically any mystery with just a sprinkle of thriller moments, nothing too gory, then you and your book club are going to love this one. And that is The Stranger Diaries by Ellie Griffiths. My last title for the night. I'm so excited to talk about this one. I'm excited about all of them, but this one is pure, just like page-turning entertainment, and it is called So Happy for You by Celia Lasky. This one we've got in print and e-audiobook, and it just came out earlier this year. A couple of people have talked about like movies being optioned, and I don't think this one's been optioned yet, but I cannot wait for the day that it is, because I think it's going to be the most entertaining movie in the world. It starts out with a line: "If you want to know the story of how my best friend and I ended up trying to kill each other, I should probably start with the night she asked me to be her maid of honor." Just sucked me right in right away with that. So this book is satirical fiction. It's got a little thriller, a little dystopia, suspenseful, dark humor. So, as you can tell, Robin's childhood best friend emerges from the woodwork to offer her the high involvement role of maid of honor at her impending wedding. Despite their recent distance and Robin's not as subtle as she thinks it is distaste for Ellie's fiance, she does accept. After all, her PhD thesis about the recent uptick in strangely pagan-seeming matrimonial rituals, which are referred to as wedding charms, could really use some less theoretical material. By the time Robin realizes that the wedding industry has truly gone off the rails and perhaps taken a wedding party or two with it, it may be too late. Will Robin survive the latest ritual sure to seal the bonds of matrimonial bliss forever? With blood? This book is My Sister, the Serial Killer meets Mean Girls with a little bit of Handmaid's Tale in it. It's funny, it's creepy, it's a little campy. And like I said, it's just pure entertainment, a total romp through the chaos and comedy of manners that is wedding culture. And that is my last book, my friends. That was So Happy for You by Celia Lasky. Thanks so much for listening.
Wow. I just have to say on air, I'm so impressed with all of our book talkers. They did such a good job. I not to jinx it because we're not quite done, but I feel like this is maybe our only virtual book bash without like a major hot mic or technical difficulty. So good job to all of us. So we are going to talk about prizes in just a minute. Uh, but I wanted to mention a couple of things first. So if you, this was a lot of books, but if you would like even more books, you can check out our custom reading list service on our website. So you can tell us just a little bit about what you're looking for. And then probably very likely one of these folks will make a list for you. I'm going to drop that link in the chat right now. We would love to hear which book you are most excited about that you heard from this evening. It is a tiny competition. There are no prizes except bragging rights from the book talker. So please share that in the chat with us. So as you are sharing that with us, I will get to our prizes. So we have 10 prizes. I will read them all through and then I will drop everything in the chat too so you can see it. So we have 6 copies of this year's Omaha Reads book, The Perfume Thief by Timothy Schaffert. Really excited about this book this year. We have programming in September and October. We will have the author for a in-person event at the Cottonwood Hotel. We have a wonderful panel discussion at the Max downtown and 3 book discussions. There's one online, there's one at a library, and there's one at Wilson and Washburn if you would like to come out and hang out with folks outside your house. So thank you all so much for joining us. If you missed anything or you would like to share this with your friends, this is recorded. You just return to the same link that you registered and you can watch this back again. We will one more time drop the link to our full book list in the chat. So if you were not taking notes, we did it for you and you can just log into the library catalog and place all these holds right away. So thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.